Why was the room so quiet when she entered? Not a word moved across the long table. Men who had been speaking just moments before now stared down at their hands or the papers in front of them, as if suddenly distracted. The low hum of the air conditioner seemed louder than breath. She stood at the doorway, uniform pressed, boots firm, her hands locked behind her back. She didn't belong here, at least not in their eyes. And yet tonight she was the one they were waiting on. Her name was Captain Elena Ramirez, 31, U.S. Army Intelligence and Field Operations. She had no speech prepared, nothing rehearsed, nothing written, just the pounding in her chest, steady, loud, and unyielding. Because tonight wasn't about words. It was about stepping into silence and filling it with courage. A colonel at the far end of the table finally lifted his gaze. "You're late," he muttered. It wasn't an accusation, more like a test. Elena's eyes didn't flinch. "Not late, sir, just ready." The words were soft, but something in her voice cut the air. A few of the men shifted uncomfortably, as if realizing that whatever doubts they carried about her presence, she didn't share them. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The mission they were about to approve, the one she had been pulled into without explanation, was personal in a way no one else in this room could ever know. She walked toward the table, her boots echoing in the stillness. Each step felt heavier than it should, dragging pieces of memory with it. A childhood photo folded into her wallet, a last voicemail from her brother that she still couldn't bring herself to delete, and the night she promised herself she would never let fear dictate her choices again. The colonel gestured to the empty chair at his right. "Sit, we'll begin." But she didn't sit. Not yet. Her hand rested lightly on the back of the chair, her body leaning forward slightly. It was as if she needed to remind herself of the weight of standing before surrendering to the comfort of sitting. Across from her, a man cleared his throat. He was older, worn, the kind of soldier who had seen too many winters in sand and smoke. His eyes studied her, not cruelly, not dismissively, but with the suspicion of someone who had watched promising faces turn to casualties. "You know why you're here?" he asked. Elena nodded once. "Because failure is no longer an option." No one responded. The hum of the air conditioner carried the silence. The mission file lay unopened in front of her, its black cover sealed with a red tab. But she didn't need to open it. She already knew the contours of what was inside. Targets, locations, risks, casualty estimates, lines drawn by people far from the places they sent soldiers to die. She knew it because the name at the center of that file, the man they were chasing, was the same man who had killed her brother. But she couldn't say that. Not now, not here. If they knew her reason, they'd pull her out. They'd say she was compromised. They'd say she was reckless. They'd say she was blinded by grief. So she carried it alone. The colonel leaned forward, hands clasped. "You'll brief the team tomorrow. Tonight, we decide if this operation goes forward at all. What do you need to say?" Her lips parted, but no speech waited behind them. Only the truth she wasn't allowed to voice. Only the weight of what it meant to risk everything again. And so she let silence speak for her. She straightened her shoulders, locked her eyes onto the colonel, and simply said, "Give me the mission, and I'll bring them home." The room shifted. Not loudly, not with words, but in subtle movements, an exhale, a leaning back of a chair, the slow rub of a hand against a jaw. Men who had spent decades in this world understood the language of conviction when they heard it. But conviction came with a price. Later that night, in the dim quiet of her quarters, Elena sat on her bunk with the mission file finally open across her lap. The photographs inside were black and white, blurred, taken from drones and satellites. A convoy moving through a valley, a compound ringed with walls and shadow. The man's face, a face she had memorized years ago when her brother's casket came home draped in a flag. Her hand shook as she traced the edges of the image, not out of fear, out of restraint. She could hear her brother's voice in the back of her mind, playful, teasing from when they were kids. "Don't get soft, Lena. You're tougher than you think." But beneath that memory lay another one, the sound of her mother's breath breaking when the officers delivered the folded flag, the silence at the dinner table after, the way her father's hands trembled when he tried to pour water but couldn't. And now this file, this mission, this chance. She closed the folder, pressed it against her chest, and whispered to the empty room, "This time I don't fail you." But even as she spoke it, a truth gnawed at her. This mission wasn't only about revenge. It was about everyone else who had been broken in the same way, every family that had heard the knock at the door, every soldier who never made it home. The thought steadied her, anchored her. Still, the weight of secrecy pressed harder. She couldn't tell her team what this meant to her. She couldn't tell them why she was so determined, why she'd volunteered when others hesitated. If they knew, they wouldn't trust her judgment. And yet, she needed them to follow her. The next day, the briefing room was smaller, darker. The men and women she would be leading sat waiting, some slouched, some stiff, faces half-lit by the glow of a projector. Their eyes lifted when she walked in, not all friendly, not all hostile, just watchful. She felt the hesitation in the air, the unspoken questions. Can she handle it? Is she ready? She stood at the front of the room, hands behind her back, her voice low, steady. "You don't know me, and maybe you don't trust me yet, that's fine." She paused, letting her eyes meet theirs one by one. "But when the time comes, I will be there. I will not leave you behind, and I will not let this mission end in failure." A young soldier in the back shifted, his boot tapping nervously against the floor. Another older scratched his scarred knuckles, eyes down. They weren't convinced. Not yet. But she didn't push. She didn't flood the room with promises. She let the silence linger, let them feel the certainty in her stance rather than her words. Because courage doesn't always speak. Sometimes it just stands there, unshaken. And in that quiet something shifted, a flicker of belief, fragile but real. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that by the time this mission was over, belief would be the only thing holding them together. And that silence, the silence she carried so firmly now, would one day cost her more than words ever could. Why did the silence in the room feel heavier than the words she had just spoken? The briefing was over, but no one moved. The projector light faded, the maps rolled back, and the weight of unasked questions lingered like smoke. Elena stood at the front, hands still clasped behind her back, feeling the room breathe but not break. They weren't convinced, not yet, but they were listening. And sometimes listening was the first step to trust. She closed her folder, tucked it under her arm, and walked toward the exit. No one stopped her. No one spoke, but she could feel eyes on her back, testing, measuring. Outside, the hall smelled faintly of coffee and metal. A young private jogged past, boots striking against the concrete floor, his laughter trailing behind him as he caught up with a friend. The sound cut against the tension still buzzing in her chest. Life, unburdened. She wondered, not for the first time, how much of that she had lost and when exactly it had slipped away. By the time she reached her quarters, the night had deepened. She set the folder on her desk but didn't open it. Instead, she sat on the edge of her bunk, staring at her boots. Why did she hesitate? She had memorized every line of that file, every grainy satellite image, every schedule of guard rotations. She knew the terrain they'd be flying into, the valley carved by years of flood and stone, the compound hidden like a scar in the earth. But knowing wasn't enough. Knowledge didn't erase the gnawing pull in her chest, the quiet voice whispering that she wasn't only fighting for strategy, but for something no briefing could ever contain. Her brother's face hovered again in memory, not in uniform, not in the coffin, but younger. The night he dared her to climb the highest tree in their neighborhood, laughing when she beat him to the top. She had been 10. He was 12. That laugh, the same one caught in the last voicemail, was sharper now, cutting against the silence. "Don't let me down, Lena." She squeezed her eyes shut. For a moment she almost whispered back, but words here would fall flat. She breathed in, steadying herself, and forced the memory back into its cage. Morning came too fast. The hangar bay echoed with movement, boots clattering against steel, the rattle of gear, the low rumble of engines warming. Dust swirled through shafts of light cutting from the high windows. The team gathered near the Black Hawks, checking weapons, tightening straps. No chatter, just the mechanical rhythm of preparation. Elena approached slowly, her presence marked before her voice. One of the soldiers, a broad-shouldered sergeant with sharp eyes, looked up. He didn't salute, this wasn't that kind of moment, but his gaze held hers, searching. "Captain," he said simply. "Sergeant." He studied her, then nodded slightly. A small acknowledgement, but it carried weight. The others followed his lead, if not with warmth, then with recognition. A team was forming, fragile threads weaving into something that might hold. Still, doubt lingered. On the edge of the group, a younger soldier sat apart, fiddling with his rifle's sling. His hands moved with nervous energy, too quick, too rough. Elena walked over. "First mission?" she asked. He froze, then nodded, his jaw clenched. "Yes, ma'am." Her voice softened. "Name?" "Private Hale." She crouched slightly, meeting his eyes. "Listen, Hale, fear is normal. What you do with it, that's what counts. Don't rush, don't try to prove anything, just stay steady. We'll get through this." He nodded again, slower this time. The tension in his shoulders eased, just barely. It was a small moment, but in missions like this, small moments were the beginning of survival. As she stood, the sergeant approached. He was older, seasoned, the kind of man who carried stories in the lines of his face. "You're different from the last one," he said. Elena tilted her head. "Last what?" "Last officer they sent us. He gave speeches, tried to sound bigger than the mission." The sergeant paused, didn't make it back. His eyes lingered on her, testing again. Elena didn't flinch. "I'm not here to sound bigger than the mission. I'm here to finish it." Something shifted in his expression. Not approval, not yet, but respect's first shadow. The helicopters roared to life, blades thundering against the sky. The team moved with practiced rhythm, climbing aboard, strapping in, weapons close. Elena followed last, her boots hitting the steel floor, the vibration of the rotors running through her bones. The bird lifted, the ground falling away, the base shrinking beneath them. Wind screamed against the open doors. The sun burned low, painting the horizon in red and gold. No one spoke. The engine's roar filled every silence, but in that noise Elena found space to think. She studied the faces around her. Hale, pale but holding steady. The sergeant, eyes closed, lips moving in what looked like a prayer. Another soldier, flipping a coin over and over between his fingers, as if each spin decided his fate. They weren't just names on a roster. They were stories, families, memories. And by the end of this mission, some of those stories might end here. The thought cut deep, because she couldn't promise them survival. Not honestly. What she could promise, what she had already promised herself, was that she wouldn't leave them, not like her brother had been left. The flight stretched long, the vibration numbing, the horizon shifting from fire to shadow. Elena's eyes traced the terrain below, dry riverbeds like scars, hills crumbling under the sun's weight, and somewhere out there the compound, the man, the reason she couldn't breathe without feeling the pull of unfinished grief. Her jaw tightened. She hadn't told them. She couldn't. If they knew the truth, they'd question every choice she made. They'd wonder if she was leading them into danger for justice or for vengeance. And maybe she was wondering the same. The helicopter dipped suddenly, banking hard. A shout cut through the roar. Incoming fire. Tracer rounds streaked the darkening sky, red lines tearing past the windows. The pilot cursed, engines screaming as he swerved. The team gripped tight, weapons raised but useless in the air. Elena's stomach lurched, but her voice stayed calm. "Hold steady, eyes on each other." The Black Hawk spun low, skimming the ridgeline, dust and stone exploding beneath them. The tracers faded, swallowed by distance. The gunfire fell silent. But the silence now was different, heavier. The team exhaled, shoulders slumping in relief. Private Hale's hands shook as he checked his weapon. The coin-flipping soldier clutched his charm tighter. The sergeant opened his eyes, calm but watchful. Elena scanned their faces. No panic, just the first crack of fear settling in. The first reminder that this mission wasn't a map on a projector, it was teeth and fire. The helicopter steadied, pushing on through the dusk. In the silence that followed, Elena felt her brother's voice again, faint but insistent. "Don't let fear own you, Lena." She pressed her back against the steel wall, eyes closed for a brief second, and let the vibration of the engines ground her. When she opened them again, her gaze was steady. Because fear wasn't the enemy. Silence was. And if her team could see her unshaken, then maybe they'd find the strength to hold. What she didn't know, what none of them could know, was that this wasn't the only silence waiting for them. There was another, deeper, darker. One that would test not just their courage, but their loyalty to each other. And when it came, no speech would save them. Only what they carried inside. Why did the landing feel more like falling than arriving? The helicopter dipped into darkness, rotors slicing through the night air. Dust exploded beneath them as they touched down on a barren stretch of earth. No lights, no markers, just shadow and silence stretching for miles. Go, go. Boots hit the ground fast, rifles up, eyes cutting through the black. The smell of dust filled Elena's lungs as she leapt out, knees bending with impact. The bird lifted again immediately, climbing back into the sky. The sound of the blades faded, swallowed by the night. And then there was nothing. No engines, no voices, just silence. The team spread out, forming a perimeter, their figures barely visible in the thin wash of moonlight. The sergeant moved with practiced ease, scanning the ridgeline. Hale's breathing was sharp in the stillness, too fast. The coin flipper gripped his rifle like it was the only thing keeping him from floating away. Elena knelt, running her gloved hand through the dirt. Dry, loose, no recent tracks, good for now. She rose, motioning the team forward. They moved in a staggered line, shadows gliding across the uneven ground. No chatter, just hand signals, the crunch of boots, the shifting of gear. The valley loomed ahead, dark and jagged, its walls rising like broken teeth. Somewhere inside was their target. Somewhere in that silence, danger waited. But silence wasn't new to Elena. She had lived with it since the night her brother didn't come home. The silence at the dinner table. The silence in her father's eyes. The silence in her own chest when she couldn't find words to fill the hole he left. Now silence was her weapon. They reached the mouth of the valley just before midnight. The team paused, crouching low against the rocks. The sergeant leaned in, voice low. "Drones say there's movement inside. 2 patrols, maybe 3, no heavy armor, but..." His paws stretched. "We've seen them get creative before." Elena nodded. She studied his face, lined, tired but steady. He wasn't trying to scare her. He was warning her. She scanned the team. Hale's eyes darted, but his grip was firm. The coin flipper muttered something under his breath, words lost to the wind. Another soldier adjusted her scope, calm and precise. Pieces of a machine, fragile but functional. Elena raised her hand, a simple gesture, forward. They moved. The valley swallowed them whole. The walls rose high, blotting out most of the moon. Darkness pressed in, broken only by the glow of night vision lenses. Their breaths seemed louder here. Every step echoed. Every stone kicked felt like a shout. Elena's pulse steadied, slow, deliberate. She forced herself to focus on details, the rhythm of her steps, the weight of her rifle, the brush of wind funneling through the rocks. Focus kept fear at bay. Halfway in, a voice cracked softly in her earpiece. "Movement, 11 o'clock." She froze, raised her fist. The team stopped instantly, bodies melting into stone and shadow. Through her scope she saw them, two figures walking the ridge above, rifles slung, their pace unhurried, guards. Her finger tightened on the trigger, breath held. But she didn't fire. Killing them now would raise alarms. Letting them pass was riskier but quieter. Seconds dragged. Sweat pricked at her temple. Her heart pounded, not from fear of being seen but from the deeper truth. That man they were hunting, hidden deeper in this valley, was the man who had killed her brother. The chance she had wanted for years was just steps away. And yet she couldn't rush. Not now, not at the cost of her team. The guards disappeared over the ridge. Silence reclaimed the night. Elena exhaled slowly, lowered her fist. The team moved again. They reached the midpoint of the valley just before 200 hours. A flat stretch of ground opened before them, the compound's outer walls faintly visible in the distance. Low, crude, guard towers at the corners, silhouettes unmoving. The sergeant crouched beside her. "We set up here, overwatch on the ridge, small unit breach." She nodded. Her eyes scanned the walls again, tracing lines of shadow and structure. Something gnawed at her, too still, too quiet. She pulled the radio close. "Hold position, check the perimeter, something's off." The team spread out, low and deliberate. Minutes crawled, no movement, no sound. Then Hale's voice, sharp, hushed. "Captain, I found something." Her pulse quickened. She jogged to his position. He was crouched near a cluster of rocks, flashlight beam low against the ground. Tracks fresh, deep, not patrol boots, not civilian shoes, heavy, dozens of them. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't just a compound, it was a nest. She clicked her radio, "Pull back now." But the warning came a second too late. A crack split the night, then another, then a dozen more. Gunfire erupted from the ridgeline, muzzle flashes tearing holes in the dark. Bullets sparked against rock, dirt exploding into the air. "Contact," someone shouted. The team dove for cover. Hale hit the ground hard, scrambling behind a boulder. The coin flipper fired blind into the ridge, his hands trembling. The sergeant barked orders, voice steady even under fire. Elena pressed against the rocks, returning fire with calm precision. Each shot deliberate, each movement measured. Her mind split between the chaos outside and the silence within. This wasn't an ambush, it was a trap. They had been waiting. The gunfire raked closer. Stones shattered above her head, dust filling her lungs. Hale's voice cracked through the comms. I can't see them." "Steady," Elena snapped, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Aim for the flashes, one shot at a time." Her rifle barked again, muzzle flash lighting the night. One target dropped. Another ducked back into cover, but there were too many. The sergeant slid against the rock beside her, reloading fast. "They knew we were coming." Her jaw tightened. "Then we changed the plan." But even as she said it, a truth settled heavy in her chest. This wasn't just about completing the mission anymore. This was about survival. The team fired, moved, breathed in rhythm with desperation. Elena's mind raced. They couldn't win a prolonged firefight here. They had to break free, shift the ground under the enemy's feet. She looked at Hale, young, pale, shaking. But his eyes locked on hers, waiting for something, an order, a sign, anything to hold on to. She gave him none of those. Instead, she gave him silence. She rose slightly, lifted her rifle, and moved without a word, forward, into the storm of bullets. Because sometimes courage didn't need commands. It just needed to be seen. And in that single act, Hale followed, then the coin flipper, then the rest. The team surged, not reckless, not wild, but with a quiet conviction that carried louder than any battle cry. The ridge still spat fire, but for the first time, it wasn't only the enemy pushing forward. It was them. Elena's heart thundered as she fired again, breath sharp, muscles burning. Not just fighting for the mission, not just for her brother, but for the living beside her, who had chosen to follow without question. And in that silence, broken only by gunfire, a fragile truth was born. Trust wasn't given, it was taken in moments like this. And now they were taking it together. Why did the night feel heavier after the shooting stopped? The valley lay still again, but it wasn't peace. It was the silence that comes after chaos, thick, metallic, vibrating through the bones. Smoke clung to the air. The acrid sting of gunpowder burned the back of the throat. Elena crouched low behind the rocks, chest rising and falling with sharp breaths, her rifle still warm in her hands. The team gathered slowly, pulling back, dragging a wounded soldier between them. Blood smeared against stone. A low groan broke the hush. Private Hale stumbled to her side, dirt streaked across his face, his hands trembling but his weapon still gripped tight. His eyes were wide, too wide, locked on hers. "Captain," they knew. They knew we were coming. She didn't answer, not yet. Her gaze swept the ridge. The muzzle flashes were gone. Whoever had been firing was gone too, melting back into shadow. No bodies left behind. No evidence, just tracks fading into sand. The sergeant knelt beside the wounded man, pressing a bandage hard against the bleeding. His face grim but steady. "He'll live if we move, but not if we stay." Elena nodded. Her voice came quiet but firm. "We move." The team shifted, bodies low, rifles up. Every sound, the scuff of boots, the scrape of gear, felt like thunder in the silence. They carried the wounded, the sergeant's hands steady, Hale's eyes darting everywhere. The valley seemed to close in tighter with every step. Darkness pressed heavier. Shadows leaned closer. Something gnawed at her. This wasn't random. This wasn't bad luck. Someone had fed them false ground. Someone had betrayed the mission before it began. And she couldn't tell them why she was certain, not without revealing what she carried. They reached a shallow cave carved into the rock, barely large enough to hold them. The team filed inside, setting the wounded man down. His breathing ragged, sweat glistening across his face. The sergeant tied off the bandage tighter, then leaned back against the wall, wiping blood across his fatigues without care. His eyes lifted to Elena. "Captain, we need to talk." The other stilled. His voice was low, but it carried weight. "They were waiting. You know it. I know it. That doesn't happen without someone giving them our path." Her jaw clenched. "We don't have proof." "Proof or not, someone sold us out." His eyes didn't waver. "And I need to know this team isn't walking into another trap." The silence in the cave thickened. Hale shifted, his hands gripping his rifle tighter. The coin flipper stopped his nervous habit, the coin clenched in his fist. Eyes flicked between them, waiting. Elena's heart pounded. She wanted to tell them that this wasn't only about the mission, that the man they hunted had already taken everything from her family, that the silence wasn't betrayal, it was personal. But if she spoke now, she would lose them. So she did the only thing she could. She held the silence. Her eyes met the sergeant's steady. "You want to know if you can trust me, then watch what I do. That's all I have to give." The sergeant studied her a long moment, then he nodded once. "Fair enough." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't belief, but it was enough to move. The night dragged on. Hours stretched thin. The team rotated, watch, their eyes scanning the valley, ears straining for movement. Sleep came in fragments, if at all. The wounded man drifted in and out of consciousness, his breathing shallow but holding. Elena sat near the cave's mouth, rifle across her lap. The desert wind cut sharp against her skin. She stared at the stars overhead, scattered across the black like scattered glass. She thought of her brother again, of the last call they had before he deployed. He had joked, as always, but there had been a shadow in his voice, a pause he hadn't explained. She had asked him what was wrong. He had said, "Nothing, don't worry about it." And then he was gone. The silence he left behind was the same silence she carried now. A shift of boots broke her thoughts. She turned. Hale stood there, awkward, clutching his rifle too tightly. "Can't sleep?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "Every time I close my eyes, I see the flashes, the noise." His voice cracked. "What if I freeze next time? What if I get someone killed?" Elena studied him. He was young, too young to carry this weight, but here he was, just like she had once been, years ago on her first mission. Afraid, doubting, but moving anyway. She set her rifle aside and spoke softly. "Listen to me, Hale. Fear means you understand the cost. That's not weakness. Freezing, that's different, but you won't freeze, because when it matters, you won't be thinking about yourself. You'll be thinking about the person next to you, and that will move you." His eyes glistened faintly in the starlight. He swallowed hard, nodded once, and sat beside her. For a while they sat in silence, the desert stretching endless before them. The sergeant took watch after, his heavy steps steady as stone. Elena closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting exhaustion pull at her, but her mind refused rest. Every detail replayed. The tracks, the trap, the silence before the ambush. Someone had betrayed them. The thought dug deep, sharper each time. If command had leaked the op, then the enemy wasn't just out there. It was above them too. And that meant the mission wasn't only dangerous, it was compromised. But she couldn't abandon it, not with him still out there, the man who had killed her brother, the man whose shadow stretched into every silence of her life. She would finish this, even if it broke her. Dawn crept slow. Pale light washed the valley in gray. The team stirred, stretching sore limbs, checking gear. No words, just movement. The wounded man's breathing steadied with the morning chill, though his face remained pale. They couldn't move him far. Elena gathered the team near the cave mouth. "We adapt. Small unit, faster pace. Avoid the ridges. We reach the compound tonight." No one objected. Not because they trusted her fully, but because they had no other choice. The sergeant gave her a look unreadable, then adjusted his rifle. Hale tightened his straps, jaw set. The coin flipper slipped his charm into his pocket, his hands finally steady. They moved out. The sun rose, painting the valley in harsh light. Every rock seemed sharper, every shadow shorter. The silence now was different, not heavy, not broken, but watchful. Elena led at the front, scanning each rise, each line of stone. Her mind steady, her pulse calm. Not because the danger had lessened, but because the silence had become part of her. The enemy was out there, waiting. But so was she. And this time, she wasn't walking alone. The desert showed no mercy. By midday, the sun had turned the valley into a furnace. The rocks shimmered. Heat waves rose from the ground, bending the horizon into mirages that teased the eye. The team moved slow, deliberate, every breath dry, every step heavier than the last. Elena led at the front, eyes narrowed against the glare. Sweat clung to her back, her rifle pressing hot against her palms. Behind her, the wounded man groaned softly with each jolt, carried on a makeshift stretcher by two soldiers whose arms trembled under the strain. No one spoke. Words would only steal the air they didn't have. The silence was broken only by boots grinding over stone and the rasp of parched throats. But inside, thoughts screamed. The sergeant's gaze burned into her back every few minutes, unspoken questions in his silence. Hale stumbled twice, nearly dropping his rifle, but caught himself before anyone could react. The coin flipper clenched his token so hard it cut into his palm. Elena knew what they were thinking. Why push forward? Why risk more when they were already half broken? Because the mission wasn't optional. Because her brother's face haunted her with every step. By late afternoon, the desert began to cool, the sun bleeding low over jagged ridges. Shadows stretched long, cloaking the valley in dusk. And then, like a wound reopening in stone, it appeared. The compound. It rose from the ground like a scarred memory, crumbling walls of sun-bleached concrete, rusted gates leaning on broken hinges. Towers long abandoned leaned at crooked angles, their outlines black against the dimming sky. The place was dead and yet alive. Every soldier felt it, the way the wind shifted inside the broken walls, the way silence seemed thicker here, heavier. The sergeant called halt with a raised hand. The team crouched low among the rocks, eyes fixed on the compound. "Captain," he said quietly, his voice edged, "we need to decide now. He's bleeding out." He jerked his chin toward the stretcher. The wounded man's face had gone pale as stone, his breath shallow and thin. "We drag him further, we might as well dig his grave. We can set up here. Radio for evac, call it." The others shifted, relief flickering in their tired faces. They wanted to stop. They wanted safety. But Elena stared at the compound, her jaw tight. "Evac won't come fast enough," she said at last, her voice steady even if her pulse was not. "This mission doesn't wait, we move in." The words dropped like stone. The sergeant's jaw clenched. "Captain." "We move in," her eyes locked to his. "That's an order." Silence followed. Hale looked between them, torn. The coin flipper swallowed hard, sliding his token back into his pocket. The wounded man groaned, shifting weakly. The sergeant held her stare a long moment, his eyes searching hers, trying to read the truth she wouldn't give. Finally, he exhaled hard, turning his face away. "Then we move." The team shifted again, this time with no relief, only dread. They crossed the last stretch as the sun bled out behind the hills. Shadows swallowed the valley whole. The compound loomed closer, walls cracked, graffiti scrawled across concrete, holes ripped by gunfire long ago. At the broken gate they paused. Elena raised a hand, signaling stillness. Her heart thudded heavy in her chest. She scanned the towers, the shattered windows, the rubble-strewn ground. Nothing moved. Yet she felt eyes, watching, waiting. She motioned forward. The sergeant took point at her flank, Hale close behind. They slipped inside the gate, rifles up, boots soft against dirt. The air inside the compound was different, cooler but not clean, stale like a tomb sealed too long. Their footsteps echoed faintly. Every broken room they passed whispered of violence, burnt walls, bloodstains turned brown, broken helmets left where they fell. The ghosts of old battles clung here. Hale's breath quickened, his rifle trembling slightly. The coin flipper muttered under his breath, words no one caught. Elena kept her rifle steady, eyes sharp, ears straining. Every shadow felt alive, every silence heavier. At the far end of the courtyard, they found it. A doorway newer than the rest, reinforced, steel frame bolted into cracked concrete, a lock fresh, gleaming against rust. Elena froze. Her pulse surged. She knew that door, not from this place, not exactly, but from a memory, a briefing photo once buried deep in classified files. It was him. He was here. The man who had ordered her brother's unit into silence. The man who had built careers on betrayal and left families in graves. She stared at the door, her breath sharp in her chest. The sergeant noticed. "What is it?" She didn't answer, couldn't, her throat tightened. Behind them, the wounded man coughed weakly, blood flecking his lips. The sound echoed too loud. And then, a light flickered behind the steel door. Faint, brief, like a signal. The team froze, rifles up, breaths held. Elena's heart slammed. It wasn't a ghost. It wasn't a shadow, it was him. And he knew they were here. Why did the walls feel alive, watching them as they stepped inside? The steel door creaked under Elena's gloved hands as she pushed it open just enough to slip inside. Darkness greeted them, thick and heavy, swallowing sound and light. Her rifle cut through it in a thin beam. The team followed close, breaths shallow, eyes darting. Every step echoed against cracked concrete floors, bouncing off walls scarred by bullets, fire, and time. The air smelled of dust, mildew, and something metallic. Hale's knees shook with each footfall, the weight of fear making him tremble, yet he moved. Elena's eyes caught his every micro-movement, Every pause, every hesitant step. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence, steady and deliberate, anchored him. The sergeant led at the flank, his experience showing in how his eyes scanned corners, how his fingers hovered near triggers, how his movements were fluid and economical. Elena's thoughts churned. Every shadow, every sound reminded her why she was here. Not just the mission, not just the team, but him, the man who had taken her brother. They moved through the hallways, careful to avoid loose tiles and debris. The compound was alive with silence, too alive. A faint shuffle echoed ahead. The team froze, rifles raised, Hale's breathing hitched. The coin flipper murmured something under his breath, barely audible. Elena leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Movement. Two figures slipped along a side corridor. Guards. She raised her hand, signaling halt. They pressed against the wall, waiting. The guards passed, unaware, and the team followed. Minutes crawled. At the end of a long hall, they reached an interior courtyard. Moonlight spilled through holes in the roof. Broken walls framed the shadows. The wounded man groaned softly behind them. And then they saw it. A figure standing near a rusted tower, not moving, not fleeing, watching. Elena froze. Her heart thudded in her chest like a drum. She knew that stance, that arrogance, that calm certainty in the presence of death. It was him, the man she had hunted for years, the man who had left her family hollow. Her finger itched on the trigger, but she didn't move. Not yet. The sergeant whispered, voice low but steady, "Captain, orders." She shook her head slightly. "Observe, don't engage." Hale's eyes widened, panic rising. "We can take him now." "No," Elena whispered, firm but quiet. "Not now. Watch and learn. We move when the advantage is ours." The man shifted, scanning the compound. He didn't know they were inside. Not yet. But his awareness, his instincts, screamed danger. Elena's pulse raced. She wanted to step forward, wanted to close the distance and strike. But strategy, duty kept her frozen. And then the first doubt crept in. Someone had betrayed them. The ambush in the valley hadn't been random. Someone had fed their location, and now this man, waiting, aware, was proof. She scanned the team. Hale was trembling, but his gaze was fixed on her. He needed guidance. The coin flipper was silent, tension radiating off him in waves. The sergeant's jaw was tight, all of them carrying the weight of choices not yet made. Elena exhaled, slow, controlled. The team followed her lead. She moved forward, silent, careful, every step measured. They entered a narrow corridor that led to the inner courtyard, each footfall a risk. Shadows shifted. Dust floated in the moonlight like ghosts. And then the first shot rang out. Not from them, from the shadows. The team dove for cover. Hale hit the floor hard, the coin flipper rolled behind a collapsed wall. The sergeant barked orders, voice calm under fire. Elena's eyes snapped toward the shooter. Another guard hiding in the ruins. She fired once, twice, precise, deliberate. The figure crumpled into shadow. The courtyard erupted. More gunfire, more movement, and the man they hunted disappeared into a side tower, silhouette swallowed by darkness. Elena rose slightly from cover, signaling the team forward. "Move, follow me." The sergeant caught her eye. "Captain, this could be a trap." "I know," she said, voice low, "but we don't stop, not now." The team moved, pressed close, weapons ready, every sense alert. They tracked shadows, breathing sharp, adrenaline carving paths through exhaustion. At the base of the tower, they paused. Elena's eyes swept upward, nodding ladders, broken walls, vantage points. The enemy could see them at any moment. She gestured forward, silently, signaling Hale to flank left while the coin flipper covered right. She moved first, rifle tight against her shoulder, every step calculated, every breath a statement of control. Halfway up the first ladder, Hale froze, his grip slipped. Elena's hand shot out, steadying him. "Focus," she whispered. "Step, breathe, move." He nodded, teeth clenched, and they climbed. At the top, the courtyard stretched below, fractured in shadows. The man was gone from sight, but the tower's door ahead of them was ajar. Elena signaled the sergeant. He nodded. Together they entered the room. Inside, the air was thick, the smell of metal and sweat heavy. Shadows danced across walls, the faint hum of electronics. And then a single figure stepped forward. "Captain Ramirez," the man said, voice calm, almost amused. "I've been expecting you." Elena's breath caught. No words came. She had no speech prepared. Only the fire in her chest, the years of silence, the resolve hardened by loss. He smirked, eyes sharp, scanning her, knowing. "You've come far for revenge or duty." She didn't answer. She raised her rifle, steady, unwavering. "Ah," he said, tilting his head, "then you speak without words." And for the first time, she realized it wasn't the enemy who would test her. It was herself. Every choice, every hesitation, every silent promise she had made, every beat of courage she had carried, was about to be weighed in this moment. The room contracted around them, the silence so thick it pressed against her chest. Her team waited behind, breath held, every eye on her. The man smiled again, a predator sensing his prey. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the loudest threat isn't the gun, it's the silence you carry." Elena's hand didn't waver, her jaw tightened, her eyes locked on his, and in that instant she knew. Courage could speak louder than any words. And she was ready to let it. Why did the shadows feel sharper here, as if they could cut? The room pulsed with tension. Every breath felt magnified. Every heartbeat echoed against stone walls. Elena's rifle remained steady, her eyes locked on him. The man she'd hunted for years didn't flinch. He didn't need to. His calm radiated control, and it was terrifying. "Captain," he said, voice low, deliberate, "you've come a long way. But do you know why I'm still here?" Her jaw tightened. She didn't answer. Silence was her weapon. Behind her, Hale shifted. The coin flipper's hands were tight around his rifle, knuckles white. The sergeant's gaze flicked between Elena and the target, reading the room, calculating. The man stepped closer. Shadows flickered across his face. "Your brother's death, did it make you stronger or weaker?" The words struck deeper than bullets ever could. Elena's chest tightened. Her brother's face flashed in her mind, smiling, alive, gone, and the ache in her gut sharpened. "Do you want revenge?" he whispered, "or justice?" Still, she didn't answer. Then a sound, not from him. A click, mechanical, faint, almost lost in the tension. The sergeant's eyes widened. Trap. A volley of gunfire erupted from behind a broken wall. Concrete splintered, dust filled the room. Hale dove firing blindly. The coin flipper rolled to cover, fumbling slightly but recovering. Elena pivoted, precision guiding every shot. 1, 2, 3 guards fell. She moved fluidly, silent but deadly. The man she hunted didn't flee. He watched, unflinching, as though the chaos around them was a test. The wounded man groaned again. Blood flecked across the floor. Elena's stomach twisted. She couldn't stop, but she couldn't ignore him either. The sergeant barked, "Captain, we need to pull him out." Her mind raced, every option dangerous, every second counted. Then she saw it, a shadow in the corner, a weapon pointed not at the enemy, but at them. Betrayal. Her pulse surged, the room contracted, she didn't have to guess. One of their own had set this up. Her gaze snapped to Hale. His hands shook, too young, too naive, but no, not him. The coin flipper. Subtle signs had been there. Hesitation at the valley, murmured words to himself. Hesitation when the trap hit. Elena's chest tightened. No words, no accusation, only action. She fired first, precision and decisiveness. The coin flipper's weapon clattered to the floor. His eyes widened in shock, betrayal mirrored in their depths. Hale gasped. The sergeant cursed. The man they hunted froze slightly, surprised, studying Elena with a new calculation. Sometimes, he said slowly, almost approvingly, the loudest action is what they don't speak. Elena didn't flinch. She moved toward the wounded man, lifting him carefully, her team covering every angle. The sergeant's eyes were on her now, not questioning but trusting. Gunfire faded as the remaining enemy retreated. Shadows slipped back into the corners, leaving the room quiet again, dust drifting in the moonlight. She stared at the man she hunted. His face, sharp in the pale light, remained calm, calculating, almost human, almost. "You've changed," he said softly. "Silence suits you, but it will not save you." She didn't respond. Words were useless. Her rifle's steady weight spoke louder than any voice. The wounded man's breathing was shallow but steady. Hale helped support him. The sergeant scanned the exits. They needed to move. Elena's eyes lingered on their target. He would escape for now. But he had felt her resolve. He had seen it. And that was enough. They moved quickly, silently, navigating the compound's crumbling corridors, shadows lengthening as night deepened. Each step measured, each breath deliberate. The betrayal had fractured trust, but the team adapted, eyes alert, movements synchronized. By the time they reached the outer gate, the first hints of dawn were brushing the horizon. Pale light stretched across shattered walls, painting the ruins in gray and gold. Elena lowered the wounded man to a safe position behind a low wall. Hale and the sergeant checked their flanks. The coin flipper was gone from the fight, subdued and restrained. The man they hunted was no longer in sight, but she knew he would not be far. She crouched, watching the horizon, feeling every muscle ache, every nerve alive. The betrayal stung, the grief pulsed, but beneath it all something steadied her. Her team looked to her, not for words, not for speeches, for action, for the quiet determination she had carried from the first step into the valley. And she gave it to them. "Move," she whispered. Not a command, not a speech, just direction. They moved as one. Silent, deliberate, carrying their wounded, navigating the ruined world they had entered together. By the time the sun rose fully, washing the valley in light, Elena paused. She looked at the horizon. The compound lay behind them, broken, haunted, yet conquered, not by bullets alone, but by courage, by silence, by the determination to move when words failed. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, not relief, not triumph, just a pause. Because tomorrow the mission would continue. The man she hunted would remain, but for now they had survived. And in that survival, she saw something clearer than any revenge. Courage was louder than words. Actions, measured and deliberate, could speak volumes where voices failed. And sometimes survival and dignity was all the speech anyone needed. Why did the final step feel like it might shatter her? Dawn stretched across the valley, washing the ruins in pale gold. The compound lay behind them, shadows lengthened and broken, a graveyard of the night's chaos. Elena paused, letting the wounded man rest against a low wall. Hale and the sergeant checked flanks. The coin flipper, subdued and silent, trailed behind, hands empty. And somewhere beyond the ridge, she knew he waited, the man who had stolen her brother from the world. Every muscle in her body tensed, every memory screamed, every heartbeat whispered that this was the moment. She moved first, cautious, deliberate. The team followed, shadows among shadows, moving as one. The trail led to a ridge overlooking a hidden bunker. Smoke curled faintly from vents. Doors were reinforced, but nothing was impervious, nothing to her. The man appeared at the entrance as if expecting them. Calm, calculated, arrogance written across every line of his face. Elena didn't speak. She never had to. Her rifle in hand, her stance unwavering, said enough. "Captain Ramirez," he called, voice carrying in the dawn. "So predictable, you pursue justice in silence, but silence can't protect you." Her finger hovered over the trigger, but her eyes never wavered. She didn't rush. She didn't falter. Every step she had taken had been toward this. Every moment of silence, every heartbeat, Every restraint had built to this. Behind her the team waited, watching, ready. Hale's face was pale, but resolve glimmered in his eyes. The sergeant's jaw was set, movements measured, eyes scanning. She exhaled slowly, and in that breath, the weight of years, grief, and vengeance focused into clarity. Then he moved. Guards surged from the bunker, fast, aggressive, but Elena had already calculated the pattern. She moved as one with the shadows, each shot precise, each movement deliberate. Hale and the sergeant mirrored her, protective, coordinated, instinctive. In the chaos, one guard lunged close. Elena pivoted, body tight, neutralizing him silently, efficiently. Another fell from a rifle shot as she covered Hale. The coin flipper remained silent, restrained, yet present. And then he was alone. The man she hunted stood, watching. No flinch, no fear, just recognition. "Do it," he said softly, almost a whisper. "End it if you can." Elena's hands tightened around the rifle. The world narrowed. She remembered her brother, remembered the night his silence became permanent, remembered her own vow, courage louder than any words. She didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, she stepped forward, one measured step, then another, her team flanking, covering every angle. She closed the distance. Her heart thundered, but her mind was calm. He smirked faintly. "All these years, and yet you hesitate." Elena stopped, her eyes locked on his, and then she lowered her rifle. No words, no speeches, only silence. He blinked, uncertain, and in that hesitation she moved again, not with the weapon but with authority, presence, the kind of courage that demanded recognition without sound. She signaled for the guards to surrender. They froze, confused. The man's arrogance wavered. One by one they dropped their weapons. No shots fired, no further bloodshed. Hale exhaled, tension leaking from his shoulders. The sergeant relaxed slightly but kept eyes sharp. The man she hunted stared at her. His expression shifted, anger, disbelief, awe. She didn't know and she didn't care. "You chose silence," he said finally, "even now." She didn't answer, she just signaled again. Guards cuffed, threat neutralized, mission complete. And then she allowed herself a glance upward. Dawn fully broke over the ridge, pale light spilling across the valley. The ruins of the night's battle glimmered faintly in gold, like memories etched into stone. Hale stepped beside her, voice soft. You didn't have to." She shook her head. "No words can undo what was done, but actions they can speak." The sergeant nodded. "You led them well, silent but unbroken, that's leadership." The coin flipper stayed quiet, still subdued, eyes tracing the horizon. Elena's gaze lingered on the light stretching across the valley. For the first time in years, she felt the silence differently. Not as loss, not as grief, but as a space for resolution. She allowed herself to breathe, finally. The man they captured was silent now, restrained, aware that his control had ended. But Elena didn't gloat. She didn't shout. She didn't demand vengeance. She had done what was necessary and nothing more. She turned to her team, each figure illuminated by the rising sun. Hale's young face still raw but hardened by survival. The sergeant steady, unwavering. The coin flipper subdued but present. All of them alive, all of them carrying the echoes of this night. Elena knelt, checking on the wounded man. His eyes fluttered, weak smile breaking through. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, not a promise, not a speech, just a truth she carried quietly. And then she rose, the light behind her catching the edge of her rifle, the curve of her face, the shadow of her shoulders. The valley was quiet now. Only wind through stone, birds beginning their morning calls, and the distant rustle of life returning. She looked at the horizon, at the sky painted in shades of gold and gray. And in that moment, she understood something she had carried for years. Courage isn't loud. Courage doesn't always seek recognition. Sometimes courage simply exists, silent, steady, resilient. She exhaled, letting the silence fill her lungs, letting the light warm her face. Her brother's memory, her grief, her loss, all of it was still there. But so was something new, a fragile, unspoken peace. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And that was enough. The camera would linger here if this were a film. On her face, calm but unyielding. On the valley, scarred but still breathing. On the rising sun, painting shadows gold. The story ended not with a shout nor a celebration. It ended in quiet, in courage, in silence, in the resolute knowledge that, no matter what had been lost, some things remained unbroken. And Elena, silent, steadfast, led them home,